Yes, people, you're locked into the Big Bad Station with yours truly, DJKat the Katalyst. And of course, we've got a very special guest joining us right here, right now. And she goes by the name of Dame Claudine Duberry. And I'm really looking forward to speaking with her and understanding her journey, what she's been up to. It's going to be a blessing. So, of course, special guest, you there?
Yeah, how are you?
I'm good. So, of course, you have to let the listeners know, let the people know who you are and a little bit about yourself.
Okay, so my name is Dame Claudine Duberry, PhD, because I have got a doctorate as well. So in the community, I'm often referred to as Dame Claudine. I'm also referred to as Dr. Claudine.
Wow.
I am a Londoner, born and bred in East London and in Hackney. My background is social work. So I've been a social worker for over 3 decades, and that's taken me into many fields. I've done a lot of work with the Home Office. I've done work with the police service, the prisons, and as said, back into social work, children and young people, mother and babies.
Wow. So you know what? First thing I have to ask is, how did you kind of create that passion for this particular field? How did it kind of all come about?
I think the field of social work came about. I was in school back in the 80s, and I think in the 80s we had lots of friends who used to get in trouble with the police, and it wasn't the kind of trouble that we see these days. It was like a slap on the wrist and off you go. But it created an interest in the criminal justice system. So I think having an interest in the criminal justice system, just kind of taking an interest in what goes on in the police stations, what goes on in the court service, kind of fueled my passion. So that was my passion for law. But then I started off as a residential social worker, which was in a children's homes when our children's homes actually existed.
Yeah.
And I've just gone from strength to strength there. So I suppose that's what's kind of pushed my passion. But just the being in residential social work, and them days residential social work, you didn't need a qualification to do it. You kind of just needed a little bit of what they term then as common sense, whatever that looks like.
Yeah.
And moving on from there, but you can only go so far in that field without a qualification, and I think I went as far as I could get before I decided I needed to have a qualification, because being a bog standard worker was never where I was going to be or intended to be.
Yeah.
So I went off and got loads of qualifications that kind of then pushed me from strength to strength up the ladder and on my journey.
Wow. And you know, somebody's already asking a question. Wow. They're asking, what is it like working in these particular, I suppose, industries, these institutions? What has been the challenges, is what a listener is asking.
I suppose when we look at ourselves as people of colour, we often see the challenges. But when you're offering them a service and they know that they need you, working with them is a lot easier. So as I said, I've worked with various institutions that would otherwise create a challenge for us. So if I go back to 2002, and if we actually go back a little bit before that, and we look at the Macpherson Report. Now, for those who don't know, the Macpherson Report was all about when Stephen Lawrence was killed.
Yeah.
And Lord Macpherson was commissioned to look at the institutional racism within the police service. And, you know, he made several recommendations on how he thought the police service could better work with the community and move forward. And one of his recommendations was that the police should work closer with communities, and they need to find a better way to work in partnership with communities.
Yeah.
Now, how the police then interpreted that was they needed an independent advisory group. That's what came out of that. So I, at the time, was a criminal justice worker in North London, but I worked along with Hackney Police Service, and the borough commander contacted us one day saying, "This is what I'd like to do." I mean, in Hackney, we had some of the biggest challenges of the community that didn't work with the police. When the borough commander heard that, and he's like, "Okay, I need to take a stand here. we need to create this advisory group. What does it look like? I was kind of thrown into the mix.
Okay.
So I was the person who was responsible for the establishment of the Independent Advisory Group. The Independent Advisory Group, working alongside the Metropolitan Police, started in Hackney, moved on to Haringey, Tower Hamlets, Waltham Forest, and now we've got the Independent Advisory Groups right across the UK. So, you know, they needed me, so I didn't see them as a challenge.
Okay.
Also, being within the high secure prison service, they need us to come in and work with them because, as you know, the prison service is overpopulated with our young people, our men. So unless you have the ability to communicate and connect with them, then they just create a havoc in the prison service anyway. So inviting us in to run various different programs with them, once again, it's a service that they need. Yeah. So I haven't really come across the challenges in terms of working in those institutions.
Okay.
I think working within social services and social work has created the most challenge for me. Not challenge as a black woman, but challenge in terms of the service that we provide and whether or not it's fit for service. And that challenges me because if we're providing what's supposed to be a service to, the residents or the community, and it's not fit for purpose, that's going to challenge me because I'm not a person that goes to work to say, right, well, I'm paid regardless of whether I do a job or I don't do a job. I go to work to ensure that the service that we say that we're delivering is the best that we can.
100%. And, you know, have you seen changes when you go into these institutions and you speak to, in particular, young black people? Have you seen the changes within them? Has it actually helped them?
I think, well, as I said, we work within the high security prison systems, probably with the lifers. Now, regardless of what work you do, they're going to be empowered within themselves. But you'll never know how that work that you've done has actually impacted them until they come back out into the community. Now, as I said, a lot of them are lifers. So when they will be back out in the community, only God knows. We've got lifers who are serving between 25 years and 35 years. And these are young people who've been in prison from 15, but they've got a life sentence. I mean, I've got 2 young men that I'm working with. They've been in prison from they were 15. They're now 35. And there's no light at the end of the tunnel that says that they will be out in the next couple of years. But I suppose the work that we're doing with them kind of empowers them as individuals and prepares them for a society that's very much changed from when they went into custody.
Wow. Somebody has sent another message in asking, have you ever been scared? Because obviously you're working in quite high risk environments. They're asking if you've been scared.
I work with a business partner.
Okay.
And he is very much, he's been in these institutions. He makes no secret about his journey through the institutions, being on the streets, being part of the so-called label gangs. So he's very, very well versed with the system. So I suppose I go in with my own protection. I don't go in as a woman by help. Although I suppose when you're in there, although you're running workshops and classes, you've always got the prison security or the ward guards with you. It's never just you and the inmate. So that also, I suppose, is a level of protection, although I wouldn't rely on them because we know that when these young men are ready to kick off, even they can't save you. But I suppose the young men on the program are very well chosen. We just don't invite everybody on. You've got to know why you're there. You've got to know what you want out of it. And they come with a level of respect. They really do. So, you know, the media tends to portray this picture that it's all thugs in the prison system. And they may have lived that life when they were on the street. They may have given people that impression of this is who I am. But in all honesty, when you're in there and you're doing the workshops with them, they are just so well mannered, so well receiving in what you're doing, and you can have some really in-depth conversations with them about their journey and what brought them here, that you're just like, wow,
Yeah.
are you the person that came in here 15 years ago, 10 years ago?
Wow.
Do you understand?
Yeah, 100%.
I have ever been scared. But even before I started this journey in high security, I used to do a lot of work within our youth prisons. And that time I'd go into the prisons by myself because I worked as a remand social worker. So it was my role to go into the prisons and kind of safeguard the welfare of our young people who were in prison on remand. And even then, I don't think that they really frightened me. I think I've heard someone say before that if you allow them to feel like you're intimidated by them, they will intimidate you. But if you go in there and hold your own, then no, it's really not like that. And I'm that person. I've gone in and I'm able to hold my own. You know, it's not about going in suited and booted. It's about going in on their level. So even if it means you have to put on your jeans and your trainers and go in there so that they appreciate that, you know, I'm not that authority figure that's coming to dictate to you. I have come in to look after your welfare. Then no, that's it.
For real. And you know, as you know, there's always a stigma with the police, especially in our community, the black community, because of, I suppose, the injustice that we have suffered throughout the years. Do you think that could ever change in the sense of working together in partnership with the police and in our communities, especially around young black people?
It's going to take a lot of change. In our lifetime, and that's just going to be honest. It's going to take a lot of change, and we are not going to see it in our lifetime. I mean, where we're based in London at the moment, we've got the Met Police who are under special measures. You're under special measures because you've fallen so far below what's expected of you. Now, you know, those special measures can stay in place for the next 2, 5, 10 years. They will stay under special measures until they actually begin to get it right. And because they're under special measures, we may actually begin to see a change. I mean, I had an incident the other day. I was out in the community and some guys got into an incident and the police were called. And somebody said, well, do you know what? It's a street robbery. The police aren't going to turn up anytime soon because it's something that normally happens. The police were there in about 7 to 10 minutes and we were like, wow, they actually turned up. Now, I said to a colleague of mine who actually is a police officer, I said, whoa, I was actually really impressed by your colleagues. They turned up and he said, yes, that's because the Met's under special measures. So now they're going to do what they should have been doing before. And I thought, actually, that's really interesting. So, you know, them being under special measures, it means that we may begin to see a glimmer of hope. As I said, they could be under special measures for the next 3, 5, 10 years. Whether we will see in our lifetime, and I suppose once they've turned that corner and began to make changes, the changes will continue going. But it's the change that they need to make in the here and now. And, you know, we go back to the cases of people like Stephen Norwich, which was high profile. Nothing was ever done then. And we've had so many cases since where nothing's ever done. But now that they're under special measures, because you just keep falling below what's kind of expected of that kind of service, we may begin to see changes.
I do hope so, 100%. I really do. And I know as well you've done a report. It's called the Duberry Report. And I wanted to know how that came about and what kind of the inspiration was behind it.
So, as I said, for many years I worked as a remand social worker. I also, the part of the work that my organisation does is to provide mentoring service to children, young people who come to the attention of the local authority. They call them gang affiliated. I don't use that terminology because it's one that's been coined by the media. I like to say they're displaying unlawful group association. So young man that we worked with, his journey was a very challenging one. You know, he was born into a family that were quite dysfunctional. A mother was doing all she could to try and keep responsibility for his siblings when his mum was out at work. Unfortunately, schoolwork started to slide. He was groomed into the gang behaviour. He ended up in a alternative education provision, and everything just went from strength to strength. But mum kind of took her eye off the ball. And when I say she took her eye off the ball, I'm not criticising her.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is she had so much on her plate, she didn't see what was happening right under her nose in the respect of her son being involved in behaviours that she didn't notice. Her son's mood has changed. She didn't notice. His whole dress code had changed. She didn't notice because her focus was making sure that they were dressed, they were clothed, they were clean, they had food.
Yeah.
The house was kept. That was her priority in looking after her children, that she didn't see the other things. Unfortunately, he lost his life to the streets.
Wow.
Now, when me and my business partner discussed what had happened with him, and I was quite passionate about it because all the young people that I work with, for me, they're just not young people that's coming to our service. They're young people who become part of the family, and we try to do the very best we can for you. And yet sometimes they come kicking and screaming because they don't want the service, but social services are saying, actually, you will have this service. You will go into mentoring services. You will. And a lot of the time, especially in the first couple of weeks, they come kicking and screaming until they realise, actually, we're not going anywhere, so you need to jump on board. And so they become part of our family. So he was a young man like that. So when he had been killed on the streets, and we looked at all the services that should have been around him, all the services that should have been there to catch the family. So we kind of looked at housing. They had challenges with their housing. We looked at the education, the school system. Although the school system will say, well, actually, we're here to deliver education. We're not here to pick up the challenges of why are you late to school and why are you unkempt and why is your homework not done and why are you not attending detention. We're here to teach you, and if by chance you're not doing your homework, or you're not in detention, or you're late for school, then it's just more and more detentions. We'll put you in isolation, but we will get through to you some way. Nobody looks at what's the root cause. Yeah. So we looked at things like that. We looked at children's services. There was children's services who were involved at one stage who kind of went in. They didn't quite meet the criteria for having a service, so they signed them off and went away.
Wow.
And also the police, he'd gotten in trouble with the police and all these red flags, but yet so this young man lost his life on the streets, and the family were absolutely devastated. And we looked at it and we thought, right, how can we get professionals to understand that regardless of whether your education, regardless of whether you're social worker and you don't quite meet the very high bar that they set that says we will provide a service for you.
Yeah.
We are going to do something to support you. And it can be early help. And when I say early help, somebody might now buzz in and say, but actually, we do have the early help team. And we have the early help team who don't necessarily come with a budget, who don't have much authority. Yeah. So when families are in crisis, if you send them to the early help team, you might as well not bother, because there's not a lot that's going to come out of that. We need to have some robust systems around these families that says a family's in crisis. And even if they don't quite meet the criteria for the looked after children's team or the safeguarding team or whatever other teams, that let's see what else we can put in place around them that will help get them out of this crisis. I mean, Mum lived in a 1-bedroom private accommodation forever, and she was paying way above the odds in rent. Wow. And, they literally ended up homeless before the local authority picked them up. So when we look at the anxiety and the stress that woman went through, you just think, right, well, where are we as a society? And that's why it's called the Duberry Report, but the subtitle is called The Fractured System, because as far as I'm concerned, we're living in a fractured system. And somebody said, but Dr. Claudine, why do you say that the system is fractured? Because as far as I'm concerned, it's broken. And I said, but if we say the system's broken, that says that if it's broken, how are we putting it back together? Yeah. At least if we say it's fractured, then we have a chance. And so that's why it came about. So we kind of looked at his journey, looked at all the institutions that were involved, and at the end of it, there's a lots of recommendations about how we can stop this happening again. And one of the things we also looked at was, you know, serious case reviews. Every time we lose a child, like we mentioned very briefly, the couple of babies that we had die in 2021, sort of between October and December. And even if they hadn't died then, and they died kind of earlier on in the year or the year before, that's literally when the court cases came to a head and when they closed. And we asked, well, how many more serious case reviews do we need before we stop losing these children, these babies in society? And a lot of the time it's the failings of the social services, because we hadn't picked up that case. And, you know, I'm not criticizing social workers, because we've got some really good social workers, but often they're stifled by the red tape around them that says, I can only do as much as I can do. And although my gut feeling tells me that that family desperately needs some input, unless my manager and the managers above, the senior management team, doesn't give me the go ahead or gives me the budget to support that family, it's just not going to happen.
Yeah. Wow, I hear that 100%. And you know what? It's interesting what you're saying and how passionate you are. I'm really kind of interested in the passion as well. And one thing I did want to ask is how, I'm going to say easy, but I'm not sure if that's the right word. How easy was it to kind of put these reports forward in the system that we have, and were people listening to you?
It wasn't easy, but you know what? One of the good things about the Duberry Report is every time we have a serious case review, or every time something happens in society, the government commissions all these big people, all these universities to look at what's going on in society. And what I say is, they do to us, and they continue to do to us, because they don't necessarily come and talk to us. They find all these data, all these statistics, and they throw them in a document and they hand them back out to us. And those are reports that are normally commissioned by the government. With the Duberry Report, we commissioned that ourselves. That means we paid for it. We went out and found the data. We collected it all, collated it all, put it all together, and it was published by us, although it's now been picked up by a couple of publishing houses. But that means that we were free to talk about what's really going on, and there was nobody tapping our mouth, so nobody saying, actually, you can't say that because that's not politically correct, or, you know, that may cause a stir in the community if you say that. No, we wanted to be very honest about what's going on. And I suppose because between us, we've got over 60 years worth of experience of the systems themselves, we could put it together. And what we did was, once it was put together, not only did we do the Duberry Report launch, but we sent it out to every minister in government who we thought should read it, and we sent it out to every borough council who we thought should read it, and we've done our piece. So now it's down to them to pick it up and read it. We've had some fantastic review on it. It's a public document. It can be purchased on Amazon, and we invite everybody to go along and read it, because not only does it tell the journey of this young man, not only does it tell the failings of the institutions, but it also gives you solutions. So it's a tool that everybody in society can use.
Wow, definitely hear that 100%. And of course, because we're coming to the last little bit of the interview, what would you like to see from this report and moving forward in the future?
What I would like to see from the report is a lot more joint up working. Now, people say, but we've got the joint up working, we've got the MASH teams, you know, the multi-agency teams, we've got all that. But my question would be is, how well do we work together? Yeah,
that is true.
And that's the question. But apart from that, we're also about to launch an organisation which we call the IOCC, which is the IOSCC, which is the Independent Office of Social Work Complaints. Now, we've got the Independent Office of Police Complaints. So every time something happens in the police complaints body comes to play, and they will investigate whatever's going on and say, yes, they got it right, or no, they got it wrong, and who can be held responsible. We don't have something like that around the education system.
Yeah.
We also don't have something like that around social work. Now, as I said, education is something that I touch on briefly. I mean, I'm governor of 2 different schools, and I'm also a director of a school, so I know how the school system works. But if you ask me what my passion is, my passion is about social work and the service that we deliver to our service users. So one of the recommendations that came out of the Duberry Report was, how do we hold social services accountable when they constantly get it wrong? And I mean, one of the reports that, you know, the listeners may have seen recently was yesterday or day before, there was a verdict that was given on a 25-year-old mother who killed her 10-week-old baby.
Yeah.
Now, what concerned me about that was because we had the health visitors, we had the paediatricians, we had the health practitioners saying to the local authority, this baby should not be in the care of their family. And if we need to put her back in the care of her parents, maybe we need to put them in some sort of supported or assessment accommodation. The local authority dismissed their recommendations, and 6 hours after this baby was placed back in her parents' care, she was dead.
Wow.
Now, how many times are we going to get it wrong? And who now is going to hold that local authority accountable, let alone that social worker, where the health visitor said the social worker came along and the social worker just seemed very uninterested in what was happening? Who's going to hold these people accountable? Because how many more serious case reviews are we going to have?
That is true. And, you know, lots of listeners are saying that they want to say thank you to you for your support and actually pushing this forward. A few listeners have said that you're really inspirational. And a few have asked if they wanted to get in touch with you, what would be the best way?
Right. So if they want to take our email address, which is info@takingpositivesteps.org.uk. And if somebody didn't have a pen to write that down, if they remember my name, whether they put in Dame Claudine Duberry, Dr. Claudine Duberry, or just Claudine Duberry, I will come up on Google. And if they contact us that way, or alternatively, they can contact us on 07931 644 909. We do run a consultation service. As I said, we are very much into the education system. We are challenging the education system on the number of exclusions that we've had. So recently I've done a video around schools out. It's now 6 weeks holiday. How do we keep children safe? But at the beginning of that video, I began by saying we've come to the end of another academic year. And at the end of this academic year, we've had 9,600 children excluded from mainstream and private education. We cannot continue going like that. We've got to bring down the number of exclusions. So if somebody contacted us and said, you know, my child, this is what's going on, we've got a team that deals with exclusions and will help them to challenge whatever's going on in school. And that doesn't say that we're coming to battle for the parents, because sometimes our parents really need to get their act together. They need to be there all the time with their child. And sometimes, as I said, because there's so much going on in society, because there's so much going on around work, we take our eye off the ball. And then when our children fall into trouble, we say, oh no, it's all the school's fault. It isn't always the school's fault. And so we're very honest, upfront and unapologetic. If it's the parents' fault, we would say, okay, guess what? You got it wrong. But we're quite happy to work with you to get it right. But if it's the school's fault, we're still going to say it's the school's fault. And guess what? How do we go forward with this? So I don't want anyone to think that, okay, I know an organisation, they're always going to go to bat for us. No, we're not, because we also need to be held accountable for our children's behaviour.
Yeah, 100%. Wow, I just wanted to say thank you, you know, for coming on and talking honestly as well, and being open about what you do. I really do appreciate your time. I know you're a very busy person, and I just wanted to say thank you for doing that. Lots of listeners have appreciated you coming on and talking about what you do. So I just want to say thank you so much.
Thank you very much. And if everybody can go buy the book, it's not very expensive. Share the book, share the knowledge, use it as your tool, because there's so much information in there that you can literally go out and say, okay, I know what happens in education, or if I come into conflict with social services, looked after children, safeguarding, I can do that as well. And we're always a team that's here, but we need to come together as a community and start supporting each other. A lot of the time we will listen to a show like this and we'll say, oh yeah, Dr. Claudine, she was absolutely fantastic, and then we walk away and we forget until the fire comes to our door, and then we want to pick it up. No, we have to be here all the time. It's just like you asked, are we going to see any changes within the police? Well, if we don't push for the changes, we're not going to see changes. You know, people say, oh, we need to have our own school system. Well, why do we need to have our own school system? Why haven't we got a lot more governors around the table? Because the governors rule the schools. So instead of saying we need the money to build our own schools, let's go take over the schools that are there. So that's another training that I do. I'm a recruiter of governors. Let's get us a lot more around the tables in schools, because I spoke about the number of children and young people that we've got excluded from the education system. But if we've got governors in the school, we have the ability to bring down the numbers of exclusions.
Definitely, 100%. Thank you so much for coming on and talking to us. I do appreciate it, and I'll be pushing the Duberry Report out there as well. So I really do appreciate your time.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you to your listeners.
Anytime, you're always welcome. Anytime you want to come on the show, let me know. You're always welcome.
Thank you very much, Kat. You have a fantastic evening.
You too. Have a great rest of the evening. Speak to you soon.
Bye.
All right.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye. Yes, people, please do go out there. Go and check out this report. It's definitely one to be reading. It's a very passionate report as well. Definitely loving the fact that Dame Claudine Duberry is out there doing the work. Please do go and support her each and every time.